non-freehold estates. Look at the name of it, non-freehold. If freehold meant ownership, then non-freehold means you don't own it. Have you ever had an interest and a stake in a property that you did not own? Yeah. When you're renting a property, what right? Do you remember, let me call them out to you. Do you remember dispossession, enjoyment, exclusion, possession, and whatever C was, control? If you are renting a property, which one of those rights do you have in the property? Enjoyment. You have the reasonable expectation that the landlord's just not going to let themselves in. They've given up control of the property during the time that you own it. You have the right to possess that property. Now granted, if you're just renting, you don't have the right to dispose, you don't have the right to sell the property, right? But you do have the right to possess it, subject to the agreement between you and the landlord. Matter of fact, let's dig deep here for just a moment. Do you understand, based on what you just heard, if you are renting a property, that there are two estates going on simultaneously? You have a non-freehold estate, you have the right of possession. The landlord has a freehold estate, and he maintains the other bundle of rights in that property. Two estates going on simultaneously. Make sense? Okay, maybe not before you step in here, but that's the only connection I'm trying to make, not also. Okay? What I want you to know right now about the non-freehold estates is simply a distinct characteristic of each one of them. That's all I'm going to focus on right now. If you haven't looked ahead, chapter 11 is the landlord-tenant chapter. Does it make sense that I'm going to revisit these again in landlord-tenant? The non-freehold estates, if it's not, it is on there. Non-freehold estates are also known as leasehold estates. Does that make sense? Okay, let me give you an idea of the essential characteristic of each one of these, and this is what you're writing down. An estate for years. Let me give you a clue. It has nothing to do with years. It can be any time period. An estate for years, here's the essential characteristic. An estate for years is any fixed, F-I-X-E-D, any fixed term lease. An estate for years is any fixed term lease. Now, what I mean by fixed term is it has a starting point, it has an ending point, and I'm telling you what's going to be key is there is no notice required to vacate. It's a fixed term. There is no notice required to vacate. Let me give you an example of one of these that you're probably familiar with that you don't even realize. If you've ever rented vacation property, typically speaking, when we rent vacation property, we show up at the beach Sunday at 3 o'clock, we check in. The following Sunday at 11 o'clock, we have to be gone. On Thursday, I didn't have to go down and give the landlord notice I was moving out, did I? I just have to be gone come Sunday at 11 o'clock. That actually is an estate for years. Why did I use that example? To just show you the point that it doesn't have to be a long period of time. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 5 years. The characteristic of an estate for years is that it's a fixed term lease. You got that? Be that specific for test purposes. Interestingly enough, when we use the word estate for years, here you could swap out the word tenancy. Estate for years is the same thing as a tenancy for years. The same for all of these. Okay? All right, let's get to the estate from year to year. I'm going to suggest that in your notes that you write next to this periodic tenancies. These are your periodic tenancies. The reason I say periodic tenancies, it could be estate from period to period, week to week, month to month, year to year. These sound more familiar to you? Okay. Periodic tenancies. Now, on a periodic tenancy, your essential characteristic is simply this. It is any indefinite term lease. An estate from year to year, a periodic tenancy, is an indefinite term lease. When we get to chapter 11, we will talk more specifically about this, but you may not realize it, but when you were leasing your apartment, you thought, matter of fact, this happens to college students all the time, well, I thought I only had a year lease. Yeah, but if you had read in the lease agreement, what it says is if you don't give what? Notice, it's going to automatically renew. So technically, that is an indefinite term lease. If you don't give notice, it'll just keep going and going and going and going. Okay? Periodic tenancies, indefinite term leases. You okay on that? All right, let's talk about an estate at will. But let's not talk a whole lot about an estate at will. I just need you to understand something in regards to the estate at will. My example of an estate at will is house sitting. House sitting. You know, my professor is going on sabbatical for 6 months. I'm a college student. I need a place to live for 6 months. This is karma right here. He says, Chris, would you mind staying in my house for this period of time? Would you mind watering the plants, whatever? All right? Will you do that for me? We enter into an agreement. Okay? It could be written, it could be verbal, there could be some money, there maybe is not any money. Don't worry about that. Do you understand that this is an estate at will? He is allowing me to stay in that property. Okay? Now, in an estate at will, oftentimes we say that notices are technically just a courtesy. There's no required notice in an estate at will. But here's where an estate at will gets interesting. Okay? Now keep in mind, what I just described to you is the estate at will. What I'm getting ready to tell you now goes beyond. If my professor comes back early, he comes back 3 months into his sabbatical, and he says, Chris, thanks for taking care of the place. I need you to leave. All right? I am kind of in Scott's now in the lap of luxury. He has a swimming pool. I can't afford a swimming pool. His refrigerator is always stocked. Mine's not. So I tell him, I say, well, I'm not inclined to leave. The estate at will just became this last bullet point down here, an estate at sufferance. As a matter of fact, any of those become an estate at sufferance if the tenant will not do what? Leave. So here's an important point. When my professor comes back, if I won't leave, how's the only way he can legally get rid of me in North Carolina? He's going to have to go through an eviction process. And you say, well, wait a minute, there wasn't even a lease. You guys were just there at the courtesy of each other. In an estate at will, he allowed me to stay on his property, right? When he allowed me to stay on his property, I created a residency there. And since I got there legally, if he wants me to leave and I won't leave, then he's going to have to go through the eviction process. What's a person called who just walks onto the property without permission? What's that person called?
Trespasser.
A trespasser. Was I a trespasser?
No.
Because I got there legally, right? If it was a trespasser, he could call a law and the trespasser's gone that day. But with me, because I got there legally, and because I have created a residency in this particular case, he would literally have to go through the eviction process to get rid of it.
Does that require a written document?
It does not. It doesn't require a written document for that to be the case. It doesn't require a written document. It doesn't require that money be paid. Okay? He allowed me to establish a residency on that property. I want y'all to think about that. When your kids finish college and they come back and they don't have a place to live, if you let them move back in with you and then they won't leave, you're going to have to evict them. I've seen it done. I've been in the magistrate's office when this was done. Yes?
When you get mail there, isn't that how you establish residency?
That goes a long way. Yeah, what they look is the preponderance of the evidence. And if you've been there long enough that you're getting mail and you've moved your stuff in, there's a high likelihood. Now listen, if you invite someone over for dinner tonight and they won't leave, call the law. But if they establish residency, as was the case in this story, then absolutely, that's one of the things you can do to prove residency. Okay? Estate at will. There's nothing wrong with an estate at will. Once it becomes an estate at sufferance, let's give you a short couple of words to understand what estate at sufferance. And some people say estate at sufferance is not really an estate at all. It's just a condition. You might want to write down next to that the holdover tenant. To me, the word holdover tenant says so much. The word holdover. They have stayed beyond their welcome, right? Tenancy at sufferance. It could be any of these guys right here. Holdover tenant. The lease ended and they didn't leave. They stopped paying me and they didn't leave. The most important thing that you just learned in that little last piece of the conversation was simply this. If you want to get rid of someone who has established residency and a tenancy in your property, there's only one legal way to do it. Now, there's a lot of creative ways to do it, but there's only one legal way. to do it, and that's to go through the eviction process if they will not voluntarily leave. Okay? We will revisit this in chapter 11. If there was one other note that you wanted to make right now, it is simply this. Eviction proceedings are heard by a civil magistrate, civil C-I-V-I-L, a civil magistrate. If you want to evict someone, there is a statutorily prescribed proceeding that has to take place, and the case is argued before a magistrate. Okay, you can stop that, please.